Hey guys, Fat Dad Fanboy here, and I'm going to talk to you today about the summer's coolest movie, Wonder Woman! Yes, that's right, Wonder Woman. I went and saw it today with the family, and it is good. Um, Let me start off by saying it is a wonderful film. It is filled with action, it is filled with some comedy, and there are moments that are flat out tearful. DC did this one right. It just was better than anything that they've done in a while. I'm going to warn you now. We're going to talk, and there's going to be spoilers. So please leave me your thoughts, your comments below about anything that you hear if you've seen the film. If you haven't seen the film and you don't want me to ruin it, turn this off. Press pause, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Wonder Woman. Again, great film. Really a lot of fun, and that starts with Wonder Woman herself, Gal Gadot playing Princess Diana, Wonder Woman. Gal Gadot does a nice job. I mean, she's a very good actress for this particular part. She's very believable in the action, very believable as a warrior. But that's not where she really shines in this picture. Where she shines is when she comes off very naive, naive about how the world of man works. She's very idealistic. At times, you can kind of see that this is a very young woman kind of coming to grips with the change in the world, and she goes out with a lot of idealism, but ultimately discovers that things are a lot different than how she really thought they were, maybe she perceived they were from her safe home. Then you've got Chris Pine, who does a phenomenal job, and it really, in a lot of ways, I think Chris Pine is the glue that holds this film together, and just makes it so fantastic, because he brings a lot of heart to it. He's very charming, he's very witty, but he's very believable. He's the heart and soul of the film. And beyond the charm that you would expect, beyond the wit that you would expect, beyond the charismaticness of the character, he's also very... he carries the weight of the war on his back, of the things that he's expected to do, that he's needed to do. So I think Chris Pine really, he brings something important to this film. And the wonderful thing is the dynamic between the two of them. She's strong, at times she's naive, but she's driven, and he feeds off of that. He feeds off of how she wants to do good, how doing good is important to her. And even though she's she's the focus of the film, he doesn't get lost in that. His character, Steve Trevor, really stays toward the front and really supports her, and has his own moments of heroism and inspiration. So Steve Trevor, Chris Pine does a wonderful job as Steve Trevor. There are a lot of other great characters in the film as well. Let's talk about the Amazons. The Amazons are very strong, they're very confident, but they're always training for this idealistic type war that never comes. It's always, let's be prepared when it does come, but it doesn't come. They just train. And then in the moments where they're actually faced with the possibility of war, it's something that they don't want to engage in. So I definitely think they're quite interesting, they're quite capable. But again, they lead this very different type of sheltered life. Whereas opposed to when you see Steve Trevor's band of rogues, or a band of heroes serving with him, it's a very different type of group. The characters are funny in their own ways, they're charming in their own ways, particularly Shamir. He is kind of the con man of the lot, but he's really funny, he's charming, he adds a lot of character to that team. And then you've got Charlie, who is another great character, who is really, he's really damaged, but there's moments of lightheartedness with him. But you really kind of feel the way the world is kind of taking its toll on him. And I think when you look at the two different types of groups, and the way Diana kind of works with each of them, and it really kind of reflects the two different types of worlds. Where Diana comes from with the Amazons, it's beautiful, it's strong, and it affords her that opportunity to be idealistic and naive. She thinks she has a grasp of how the real world is, and how the world of man is, and what men and women, human men and women, are really like. from that perspective, from that safe perspective, where you're protected. And then, of course, when work actually comes to the Amazons, and she gets a real taste of what that's really like, she struggles with that. That can be becomes very challenging when she sees one of her fellow Amazons fall. And she comes to the realization of, how war is, and maybe some of the spirit of man. But again, she kind of relates that back to, this is the influence of Ares, this is the influence of the god of war, and him plaguing the hearts of humans, the hearts of mankind. So when she goes off, into the world of man, she really kind of begins to see some of the horrors of that world. Again, she keeps that idealistic kind of light inside of her initially, believing that she can make it better. All she has to do is get to the god of war, who she believes is the cause of all of the suffering, all of the war between the world. So it really kind of drives that story from her idealistic point of view initially. And then, of course, you get the Germans as well, who, in their right, kind of represent the evil, the lust for power, the lust for control. So they represent a much darker side of mankind in the film, whereas Trevor's team is really, they bear the weight of wanting this to change, wanting to put an end to this, wanting to save lives, to the two main German villains who really want to make sure that they control the world, that they cause destruction to their enemies, and they continue this on and drive it forward. So it's definitely some different viewpoints of mankind and how we're represented, and then how she changes as she sees these things, and how she changes the characters around her. There's a point where this takes place in World War One, so they're doing some trench warfare, and they're going through the trenches, and they refer to this field where the Germans have their machine guns, and the trenches on the other side, and they call it no man's land. And Diana really, she gets up out of this trench where, as Steve and his band of guys says, we can't cross here. It's too dangerous. It's deadly. And she leads and, really inspires them to come out, and they are able to get across the field and really save this city from the Germans. So it's a fantastic moment. It's a great moment of victory for her. It's really probably the best action sequence in the film. So definitely, though, the best part of it is how inspiring she is to that band of characters. And then, of course, there's some other characters that really kind of drive some fantastic points about the story as well. You've got Etta Candy, who is Steve's secretary, and she really brings in a lot of humor and fun to the film. Definitely a lot of the best lines, and a lot of the most lighthearted parts of the film are surround her character, and she really kind of contrasts Diana, whereas Diana's very idealistic and very serious. She brings some of that fun to Diana, and kind of helps kind of point out that this is a different world for Diana, and in a lot of ways she shows her she kind of contrasts the type of woman that you see with the Amazon towards and the type of woman you see in that time period. So really that particular character really adds a lot to the story, just from a point of not making it too heavy, not making it too serious. And then you have Sir Patrick, who is part of the British command, and he appears to be Steve's friend, and sympathetic to the cause and wants to see it end. Big plot twist, major spoiler here, is later we find out that he is not exactly who he appears to be. At the end, Diana goes off she sees a little bit of failure by going after the person that she believes to be the god of war, and of course it turns out not to be exactly what she thought it was. So later we find out that Sir Patrick is not exactly what we thought he was either. So it really kind of adds a new element to that whole dynamic, and so it's a very it's a good twist, but it's kind of it's not exactly what you would it's not exactly what you would expect, but it helps Diana grow. It helps kind of help. We also see that that mankind, our nature, no one makes us do the things that we do. I'm sure you've heard the expression of idle hands doing the devil's work. Well, this is kind of the devil, in a way, kind of keeping hands from being idle but still doing his work, I guess. He kind of influences humans to do what they're already drawn to do. They're not necessarily doing his bidding, but they're choosing to do that. He just puts the idea in their head. So definitely a fascinating twist on that. So I think all of that, though, the main thing that you really get out of this film is that it's contrasting the two worlds. So great characters, great story, and then again, really it's commentary on mankind and how Diana grows. And ultimately, there's a lot of sacrifice. At one point, she's really kind of disenfranchised a little bit with Steve and his band of brothers, and she goes off and she discovers who she's really fighting and who her real enemy is, and as she engages in that, we see Steve make the ultimate sacrifice, and it really inspires her, changes her focus quite a bit. If you were to ask me to talk about what the best part of the movie was, from an emotional point, and then the least interesting part of the movie, they take place in the same time frame, because I think the fight that she has with her ultimate enemy is probably one of the most unnecessary parts of the film. I mean, it's necessary because you have to have the conclusion of the story, but it doesn't bear the same weight as everything she goes through during the journey. And then when Steve ultimately makes a very large sacrifice, and how that affects her, they're all happening at the same time. She's, it's a great moment when she has to come to the realization of some of the things that happen and how they develop her into the great hero that she becomes. And then, of course, you're still dealing with this closure that she's trying to get from her own battle with her, with her enemy, with her expectations. So again, just a overall great film. But what makes the film great isn't just the action. It's the emotional gravity of it. It's the emotional, the change from the idealistic person to the realistic person, but then kind of keeping some of your great ideas, our ideals in the journey. Overall, if you're looking to see a film, this is probably one of the best DC films in a long time. I rank it up there with 1978's Superman by Richard Donner, 89's Batman by Tim Burton, and then of course 2008's The Dark Knight. So I mean, it's really one of the easily four best DC films that have ever been made. And I'd say it's in the top 10 comic book films ever made. It is just so good. Not really a lot that I could say wasn't good about it. There's never a point where you're like, oh man, come on. It's just so good, and it keeps going, and it touches you on so many different levels. Emotionally, you laugh, you cry, and then of course you get excited at some of the great action. So overall, if you're asking me if you should see it, yeah, definitely see it. Great film. Thanks for watching, and hey, maybe you can be one of my first 10 subscribers. Check me out. Fat Dad Fanboy out.